Feeling overwhelmed by life's challenges and seeking healing? Welcome to Your Love Talk, a safe haven where you'll discover effective strategies to overcome obstacles. Join Dr. Beverly Booth as she explores inspiring tales of resilience from individuals who have triumphed over adversity, emerging stronger and more fulfilled. Unleash your inner strength and embark on a journey of transformation. Now, here's your host, Dr. Beverly.
Welcome to Your Love Talk. I am so thrilled to welcome to this podcast episode, Corey Bendix, who is the Associate Pastor of Outreach and Evangelism at Grace Covenant Church in Chantilly, Virginia. Corey talks about his struggle with his speech impediment and the pain and shame he experienced as a child and young adult because of it. Corey experienced emotional and spiritual healing when he allowed God to heal the pain that he was carrying. He then answered the call to become a minister of the gospel to serve those in need. Corey realized that his speech impediment is a gift, which has helped him grow as a person, a husband, a father, and a leader. Listen to Corey as he shares his story. So Corey, thank you so much for being on this podcast episode today.
Good to be here. Thank you so much for allowing me to join you, for the great invitation. It's an honor.
So Corey, one of the reasons that I wanted you on this podcast, I actually thought about this for a while, and I saw you at church. You actually are an associate pastor at Grace Covenant Church. And I've always admired the work that you do. You are in charge of outreach. And I remember during the pandemic hearing you on Zoom, I guess whatever the recording is, because we weren't in person at that time, and talking about our church coming together and helping people in our community who are struggling. And it's grown so much. So I do want to give you the opportunity to talk about the Grace Loves that you are in charge of.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I think just a little bit about that, just our story as a church. Again, we are about 40 years old, a little bit more than that. And for about the first 35 years or so, I think so much about our church was, like so many that are larger, focused on a lot of specific things, mainly lots of events, kind of going from event to event. And the pandemic really slowed us down. In fact, it shut us down. But in the slowing came a recalibration of why we existed as a church. It forced us to ask the question, if we were to disappear, would anyone in our city really notice?
Oh, wow.
And I think this was, as horrific as the pandemic was, earth-shattering on so many levels. God really used that as a means of grace, I think, for us as a people, to invite us in to capture his heart freshly for his people. And the hope of what we wanted to accomplish and what we felt invited into was a combination of the great commandment, which is to love your neighbor, while at the same time holding on to the great commission, which is to proclaim the hope of the gospel to all nations. And so we got thrust, it's almost like our eyes began to open up in a fresh way to see our city through a new lens. And we began to step into needs. And some of the larger needs that we were able to support and to sustain was, I think we gave out about 8.5 million pounds of food to about 250,000 people over the course of about 3 to 4 years, in partnership with a few organizations, but consistently week in and week out. But then as we stepped into these needs, it was almost like we began to get baptized into the reality of the needs of our city. And so one need turned into another, which was the specific, just the challenges of those who were in the front line. And some of the battles that they were facing just to stay in the game, to stay encouraged, to be, emotionally, they were overwhelmed and outmatched. And so we began to gather resources to put together care packages and meals and write cards of hope and encouragement. Well, that turned into beginning to see that there was an influx, about 500% increase in local high schools with young girls who were finding themselves with child. And so teen pregnancy went through the roof. And so as a church, we looked at that and said, we've got to figure out a way to step into that need. Well, that turned into beginning to discover that within about 3 miles of our church, there was about 20 massage parlors, if you will, and sex trafficking during the pandemic was at an all-time high. We discovered there was over 1,000 parlors in Fairfax County alone. And so the more that we entered into the needs of our city, the more we realized the deep, painful, challenging, messy needs that God was inviting us to at least try to put our arms around. And with faith and with, again, Great Commandment, Great Commission, working together to serve while at the same time to proclaim the hope of Jesus. And so this really calibrated our church around a mission. And Grace Loves exists to embody the grace and love of Jesus to meet needs within our city. That's our why. That's a why that will never change. And then along with that, though, we discovered a how. And the how will adjust when it comes to time, but we exist to gather the church, reach the marginalized, aid the front line, coordinate with established partnerships, and empower our city. GRACE. So that's the why and the how. Really, through repetition, we held this thing out to our church week in, week out. I mean, throughout the 2 to 3 year journey of this pandemic experience. And then all the while inviting our church into spaces where they could serve, where they could, no matter if you're a single mom or if you're out of work and you have an opportunity to invest yourself into these needs. I mean, we wanted to make opportunities to serve sustainable, available for all walks of life. And then in the midst of this, and this is really as a result of our bishop, Brett and I had a discussion the week that the pandemic started. And he said I'll never forget. He said, Corey, you get into the community and you inspire our church with what we're doing, and I will ask our church to give. Mm-hmm. And what we receive, we are going to invest into ways to serve and love our city. And at the time, we had no idea how deep and wide this would affect us as a church, but just the heart that he had and ultimately that we had of, before we do a thing, we are going to set aside resource to care for and invest in and sacrifice ourselves, wring ourselves out for the needs of our city. And the result of that was over the course of the last several years, we as a church have been able to give close to about $3 million from our church that has gone specifically to Grace Loves. And from that to be able to expand, to cover and to reach. I mean, now we have Grace Loves the refugee. Now we have Grace Loves the family, which is specifically for foster care and for adoption. Now we have Grace Loves Justice, which is, I'm really excited about this. This is our heart for those who are incarcerated, those who are in incarceration, those who are serving those in incarceration, those who have families. As a family, they are trying to figure out life with a mom or a dad who's in prison, those who have been affected by and are victims of incarceration. So it is holistic. It is messy. I mean, we're trying to build the plane and flying it all at the same time. So all of what we're doing as a result of the pandemic and Grace Loves and the beginning of that and our church's response to that and the way that God's really blessed it has really been a journey of excitement and challenge and tears. For me as a Caucasian white, as a man, I had no idea what Hispanic families are really navigating, for example, of what they face when it comes to racism, what they face when it comes to just survival, what they face for just some of them crossing a border and trying to fight for survival and for them to come here. Over the last 3 years, I've been able to mentor a young man at Herndon High School who came over, he and his sister, and they barely made it. And to be able to hear his story and to support his family, and it's opened up my heart, it's opened up my mind, it's opened up me as an individual to have an empathy that I've never had before. Yeah. Really feel like it's gospel entrenched, it's gospel rich. It allows for the heart of the Father to freshly live in me, and as a result, have a level of compassion and clarity in how we serve. So that's a little bit of my story.
Wow, Corey. I am so inspired. I truly am. And just to see the growth and also to be able to have that place of compassion because you're in the trenches to actually see what's actually happening. And then to bring our congregation along in this process. I was able to volunteer, packing boxes, giving, and being able to know that you can touch people's lives and make an impact is so important. And I truly believe that as difficult as the pandemic was, I believe that God wanted us to actually turn to him, to be able to just be quiet and to be able to see what's in front of us and to pivot and to make a change and to look at how we can be used in this community. And not even just this community, but even beyond this community, even in our country. And so to be able to hear the passion in your voice, it just inspires me. It inspires me. I do want to ask you another question, a more personal question. One of the exhortations that you were giving, you became very personal one Sunday, and I truly admired your vulnerability. You talked about your speech impediment.
Yeah.
And that was important to me because as a kid, when I was much younger, I remember struggling with stuttering. And I remember feeling that I had to hide because I was afraid of how the words were going to come out. And even as I got older, it got better. But there are times when I have to present or talk. Sometimes if I tell myself that I'm going to have a difficult time with a word, I have a difficult time with a word.
Yeah, absolutely. Get it.
And it's also my mind. I have to really work on that mind. But I've always admired, our church is very, very large, how you're able to work through your speech impediment, to be able to allow God to use you in this capacity.
I appreciate that. So my story is a very extensive one when it comes to this as a defining part of who I am. You've already heard it already of just getting stuck on certain words. Since I can remember, I have had a very challenging time trying to talk. You know, with things that you can't control, it's very different to try to find your place in the world and just how you see yourself. And then knowing within moments, within seconds, you are being defined by someone as they hear or see. You're watching them slot you in certain places in regards to how they view you or their power over you. And I never handled that well. I hated that. I think one of the significant kind of moments of my life, I remember as a child going to a speech therapist as a third grade, being pulled out of school to go to a speech therapist and just fighting to say certain words and crying, like going with my dad. And I'm glad that he did this, but he would ask me to reserve a table at a restaurant and then to order for the family. And I would get stuck. I would get so angry and I would get so sad. And he wasn't trying to humiliate me. He just was trying to guide. He would do it alongside of me, which was great, but still so hard. And so all of my life has been filled with going to therapists, going to speech therapists, getting devices. I mean, like it was for a long time, there was this amazing device that got formed out of East Carolina University. It was called Speakeasy and it won a Nobel Prize. But it's a little device you put in your ear. It cost like $10,000. And it was a device that it would cause you to hear yourself, but like a split second late. So it's almost like your whole brain is trying to listen to yourself talk. And as a result of listening, of being distracted, it enables you to talk somewhat normally.
Never heard of that.
It's not as big as it was, but I mean, my grandparents found out about that and wanted to buy it. So I did that for a while. The challenge with that is it becomes addictive. And so your whole world now is depending on this. And so if you don't have this, then it's just very hard to operate.
Okay.
And then as a high school student, I started to drink. I was an alcoholic in high school because, I discovered that one of the side effects of alcohol is it numbs pretty much everything, and including your mouth, including your tongue. And so, man, I was magic talker when I got some Beefeater gin in on the inside of me. And so it was not a good combo.
Wow.
That led into, again, a depravity, a darkness. It just revealed that there was something broken in me way more than just my mouth. There was a brokenness that I couldn't fix. There was a brokenness that no amount of alcohol could remedy, that I was in need of an outside source to restore me to what I was designed to be, not just in being able to talk well, but in me, in my humanity, in my heart and wholeness. Even in being pulled out of this treadmill of shame that I felt like I was stuck in. With a treadmill, you're just going over the same, like you're just going over and over and over, and you're exerting a lot of energy and you're going no place.
Yeah.
And I was stuck in shame that I was expressing it in different ways. Like guilt is I messed up, shame is I am the problem. And so I felt like I was the problem. And I was in the same way in Genesis 3, when it comes to Adam and Eve, they ran from God and they hid. They tried to take fig leaves and they tried to cover themselves. And so like my whole life has been hiding and trying to cover. And so one of the defining moments in my encounters with Jesus, again, on September 7th, 1998, I just had this awakening of seeing my own brokenness, acknowledging I couldn't fix it, acknowledging that my worst enemy was me, that no one had hurt me more than me, that no one had stabbed me in my back more than me, and that I needed not just a change, I needed a new me. And that's when I felt like I surrendered fully to the gospel.
How did you get there?
I got there at a series of failures and like horrible decisions. I went to a restaurant. So in 98 is when I came to faith. Earlier on that year, I went to a restaurant with some friends and imbibed a lot of alcohol and drove home, and I blacked out on the way home. I got home, but I really don't know how. And I woke up bawling, like I was crying. I knew that I was at a state in my decision-making that I didn't even recognize me. Yeah. And I was so scared. And so that began this collection of defining moments that awakened me to a need to change. And it was God's grace. It's Romans 2, the kindness. Yeah, the kindness of God leads us to repentance. And it was his kindness that was allowing the chaos, but the chaos wasn't destroying me, thankfully. And so it all led to this moment of awakening. But in the midst of this, I'll never forget what I sensed in my own heart. My prayer was, God, I have nothing to offer, but I offer you me. And the response was, I want to use your greatest place of pain. And I just had this deep sense that God wanted to use me, a liar, dreamer, and a misfit, to engage liars, dreamers, and misfits. And then I really had this deep conviction that God wanted to use all of me, and including my greatest point of tension and challenge and confusion, namely my ability to speak or lack thereof. And so from that point on, it was like I came alive. I came alive in regards to how I studied. I came alive when it comes to having a passion to be able to communicate the story and the hope of Jesus to people who nobody else really wanted to talk to or felt like they just were too far gone. And so I loved those who were really hard in their hearts, hard in life. And so that's who I've been kind of trying to reach. And my heart has been kind of leaning in towards that. But at the same time, I had a real conviction too, in a world where most people think about pastors through a lens of perfection. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that's a good perception, but just the idea, the presupposition is this is a person who their life is buttoned up to a point that even in the way that they talk and presentation, I mean, there is when it comes to weaknesses, you don't see much. And so much of my life is now, the weakness is front and center.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't try to hide it. In fact, more often than not, I try to harness that to a real expectation that at some level for all of us, we are the walking wounded. There's places of weakness that we try to hide or we try to run from, that God wants to bring to the cross, cover with his love and his commitment to be a dad, to be tender, and then at the same time to use weakness as a window by which people see him through. And so that has been kind of my story, point of focus, a point of passion, and it's messy and it's hard and it's filled with a lot of ups and downs.
Thank you for sharing that, Corey. Oftentimes, we all see pastors and we kind of see them on the pulpit, and it's almost like we're expecting perfection, but no one is perfect.
Yeah. And
it's a reminder that God uses everyone and anyone that's got that heart and willingness to listen, right? And oftentimes we will hit that rock bottom because God is trying to get our attention.
Yeah.
Right. And it's amazing how he used the part that you thought wasn't good, wasn't pretty.
Yeah.
He used that part of you. And to be able to have you understand the struggles of others and being in that place of vulnerability to be able to speak and talk about your story, it makes such an impact.
It's good. It's great. Just as in a point of encouragement for those who are trying to interpret their own pain, and as well as to discern it and to figure out where is God in it.
Yeah.
Because, I think for many of us, we come out of certain family environments where a mom or dad has just a divorce or certain words or declarations or just certain seasons where it feels like just our world is colliding or beginning to fall on top of us. And we have no idea how we got here, or is God even God? Where is he? How does he want to use this? And I think 2 Corinthians 12 and 13 both have just been such life for me when it comes to Paul, who is facing this thorn in his flesh, is what he calls it. And he's trying to get rid of it. And he's praying and he's praying, he's praying. And we're not really sure what it is. For some theologians, they think that it may have been gout. Just an ailment as a result of some of the abuse and the beatings that he had received. I don't know. But at the end of the day, he was believing God to get rid of this. And the response that God gave him is so stunning, and it reverberates for us no matter where you are, is that in your weakness, that is the very environment where his grace is revealed and it's expressed. And so what Paul says is he wants to boast in his weakness. And I think that we live in a world where we boast in so many things, and our boasting usually is as a result of our trophies or the things that we've worked hard to define us. And ironically, the very thing that ultimately defines us more than our trophies is our weaknesses, is the things that we don't talk about, but that we secretly are trying to fend off.
Yeah, to
fight
hide
against. Yeah. And Paul says, man, there's a place of now acknowledging the weakness, offering it to the king. And then in doing that, God, he promises, he commits himself to using that weakness for his glory and for our good. And I really want to encourage those who are listening that there is a king who has allowed pain and trauma and chaos and confusion, not as a punishment, but as a tool of his grace to form you in himself, to remind you of a loving God who sits enthroned as a father that is committed to partnering with you and using pain for real purpose.
I love that. He does use our pain for purpose. I like that. So Corey, I'm thinking about the time that within your spirit, you felt that God was calling you to be a pastor.
Yeah.
Because I can imagine that was probably a really scary time. Like, are you sure, God? Yeah. I don't know if that happened to you or not. Yeah. But can you talk about that moment when you felt like this is what God is calling you to do?
Yeah. My dad is a pastor. He's been on staff at the church here for just retired here recently, but he was with Brett for 27 years, 30 years. It was a long time. And so I had a context of what a pastor meant. But I think when I came face to face with that role or with that invitation, I saw it as great and terrible all at the same time, where I knew how much this was going to cost me, that it was going to require that I face my pain every day. And I think that was the thing that was the hardest, of knowing that it was I was being invited to humiliation. I was being invited into being made fun of and belittled, and was going to be invited into, which I have been. What I mean by that is like standing in front of people and kids, especially like high school kids. I mean, one of the things I loved to do back in the day is I would ask to come alongside of football teams and wrestling teams and basketball teams and be a character coach or to be a chaplain of some sort. I was stepping into environments with more rough around the edges, big personality, leader type, but they were going a direction that was very different from my life. And so stepping in front of these environments and with authority, trying to hold out the hope of Jesus and getting stuck in the process and watching kids look at me and laugh at me. And I think that at first I did not take well to that.
That's hard.
Yeah, it was hard. But then it got to a place of kind of laughing alongside of them, going, hey, Like, I know, free to laugh. It's okay. Just hold tight. I'm going to get through it. And so trying to make light of it, acknowledge it, and then move on. On one side, I knew the cost, but on the other side, I was so excited. Like I felt like I just was so pinching myself because I thought, why would a God who created everything and has all power use someone like me? And yet knowing that he was like doubling down to partner with me, I knew it. I knew that I knew it. And I'm like, why are you doing this? It makes zero sense. And yet here we are. And so I knew the cost, but the privilege and the opportunity and the commitment of God giving me something I didn't deserve far outweighed what it was going to cost me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also that reminder that God sees beauty in everything and everyone.
Yeah.
We may focus on the things that may not be so pretty, but God can use anyone and everyone, and he created us.
Yeah.
And so it's that reminder of always demonstrating love and acceptance for others because we don't know what they're going through.
Good. It's true. And just the image of God placed on all of humanity. And in spite of the background, in spite of the wars within and the wars without, yet I think with me, knowing that on September 7th, the spirit that was dead within me came alive because of God's grace. And just he expressed his mercy to me by allowing me to respond in faith to the gospel. And it brought me to life. I mean, it quickened me. I mean, it awakened my eyes. It opened my ears. That's what I have as a perspective, as a background, as a context to faith when I step into environments asking God, will you do in them? Will you bring them to life? Will you awaken, quicken the Spirit of God in them that you created them to have, but they're not in it. They are body and soul, but they have no spirit. They are not fully human. God, will you allow your gospel to bring them to life so that you can use them and all of their pain and all of their challenge for a unique purpose?
It's learning how to get out the way so that God can use you.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. So who were some of the support systems to help you to be the person that you are today?
Yeah. So I have an amazing dad and mom. The background of my story too is my mom prayed for me every single Thursday for a year and a half before I came to faith in Jesus. My mom and dad were very well aware of my struggles, of my journey, of, they could have kicked me out of their house. They could have done a lot of things. Some parents think that they should have. And I'm so thankful that they pressed in to try to discern God's heart for where I was in figuring out how can we embody the gospel in a clear way to our son when he doesn't deserve it.
Wow.
And it was that action of being determined to hold out the hope of Jesus and the life of Jesus and the commitment of Jesus in their actions, in their love of me, that really, it gave me a backdrop. It gave me a sign that I could look at pointing me to who Jesus is through the way that they love me. So they are a big part of where I am today. And then along with that, I think the commitment of Brett Fuller. He was my pastor when I was in high school. I've been going to Grace since I was a kid. And he would come and take me to lunch at Herndon High School as a senior. Just, he knew I was a complete hellion. I mean, he knew I was just not doing well. And he would take me to lunch and would ask, he just wanted to hear how things were going, hear my story. He was from an early age trying to commit himself in partnership with Jesus to my life. And then, just lots of personalities like that, great men and women who believed in me, who committed themselves to me. I am fully bought into the reality that the family of God is the greatest gift in the earth here today. Is just the church for me is so rich and it's full-bodied. It is so extensive because of how it has wrapped around me to cover me, to challenge me, to support me. Again, it's not just about trying to use the church to get connections, to get where you want to go. It's like God using people to form your journey along the way and to be with you in spite of yourself, in spite of your failures. And so Yeah, I am amazed at how God's people have been a direct expression of God's heart to fulfill God's purposes.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you think about it, when you talk about whether your dad or even Pastor or Bishop Brett, who mentored you, and how you're now also mentoring others.
Yeah.
It becomes full circle.
It's good.
I like that. And so what are some of the lessons learned? Looking back now, what are some of the lessons learned in your life as you process this?
Yeah, I think a few of the lessons learned, there's a lot. As a father of four, ranging from 21 to 14, I think I have a real compassion and commitment to join my kids in their chaos at times. I think that has been formed in my own experiences. And so I really am working to have a heart as a dad to challenge my kids, but then to be a safe place for them to feel the encouragement and the compassion, but the belief from me that God wants to use your pain. You are not too far gone. Yeah. Like, let's just keep going. I think another thing that I've learned is I am so thankful for my stuttering. And here's why, is that it has created in me the elements of character and strength that without it, I wouldn't have. So I'm a fighter. I love to fight for people. Mm-hmm. I'm a person that I don't give up. Yeah. I'm hard to get rid of. And I think that comes out of my experiences. I am a person, if you are in a battle, you want me because I love to push. Like I just have an ever ready battery on the inside of me to join people who are battling, who need a partner. So I think that's a lesson learned. I think that I love the underdog. I have a passion for people who are forgotten. I am fully committed to people who nobody else wants. And so I think that's a part of kind of the story here. I think a lesson learned is I know that as a believer in Jesus, a disciple, a follower of Jesus, we're supposed to love the gospel, but it's super easy for the hope of the gospel to go from the hub of the wheel that allows for the wheel itself to keep going. Mm-hmm. Like the hub is the central, it's the aspect of the wheel that without it, it falls apart. I think so. It's so easy to make so many things the hub instead of the gospel. And I have been so impacted by the power of the gospel on an ongoing basis that I think a lesson learned for me is I love and am committed to and am amazed by the beauty and simplicity and power of the kingdom of the gospel and what Jesus, the King, wants to do to bring in his kingdom in every life. And the way by which he does that so uniquely and differently in people's lives, yet at the same time, he's still using this gospel to change lives today as much as he did when he came 2,000 years ago. So those are a few thoughts.
Thank you. And those are great lessons. And one of the things that I see in you is that desire to serve and to love people. And in the scripture, it talks about having those seeds and the fruits and being able to see those fruits. Yeah. And I see those fruits from the way that you're talking and just from the work that you're doing in the community.
Good.
So for people who are struggling with whether it's a speech impediment or something that they think is holding them back, well, what do you want to tell them?
Yeah. If you're facing a physical challenge that you can't control, you feel like is defining, I want to tell you that the power of the biblical story is one of a God who enters into our story. No matter, in Mark 1, you have the story of a leper, and everyone, that was a pain as well as a trauma that was so powerful that you would be defined by that for the rest of your life. And the amazing reality of Jesus is he enters into stories like that and he removes the sickness and gives us an identity that supersedes what we had always carried. And if you find yourself being defined as an alcoholic, divorcee, or like me, a person who stammers or stutters, or just wherever you are in regards to an ailment or a struggle that you can't seem to shake, I just am holding out fresh hope that the God of all creation is bigger than that and wants to adopt you freshly into his family. And his adoption takes you out of the old family and puts you into a new family. And that adoption it's free, it's full, it's forever. It supersedes where you come from. It is big enough to change the fabric of your heart. It is beautiful enough to put you in connection and relationship with people that will help you along the way. It is so defining that in regards to Jesus, he promises to give you an inheritance that will never spoil. It will never fade. And that the result is that it's to the praise of his glory. That when we are adopted, it gives us a new celebration in our heart that is as a result of the adoption that we've been given, that we do not deserve, that our whole life becomes now to the praise of his glory. And so that's hope. That's a good story. That's a narrative that we can be reframed and retrained in.
Yeah, that was the word that came to me, hope. It gives people hope.
Good.
And that we're not stuck. And really that God knew us even before we were even born.
Yeah.
And has a plan and purpose for our lives, no matter what situation we are facing today. So thank you for those words of hope.
Good.
So this is your love talk. And your love talk is really about those words of affirmations that we give ourselves to keep going in the midst of struggle. Are there words of affirmation that you give yourself when you're facing challenges and you want to stay motivated?
Yeah, I think it's just the words of Jeremiah that, again, all of the talk that I try to give myself is rooted in the transcendent hope and words of the scriptures. And in Jeremiah, he says, heal me and I will be healed. Save me and I will be saved. For it is you that I praise, O Lord, my God. And so those are the words so often that I cry out to, that I long for, that I find strength in, that salvation and healing, and ultimately praise to the glory of the one who formed me in his image.
Love it. Corey, thank you for being an inspiration. Thank you for your heart. Thank you for this passion that you have for others and for allowing God to use you. Thank you.
It's an honor.
How do people find you?
So in a perfect world, I would be active and ongoing on all social media accounts, but I am not a social media person. I know I'm on Facebook, I'm on the gram, I'm on those things technically, but I don't really use them. So if you would like to reach out to me, I would love to give my email address because I do email. And so if there's anything I can do to encourage or support, or if there is any clarification that is required or needed from me, kbendix@gracecov.org is the best way to connect with me.
Sounds wonderful. And if they do want to get involved with Grace Loves, how do they do that?
So easy. So if you just text the word Grace Loves, one word, to 82155, it's super easy. If you do that, then what's going to happen is that you're going to now get locked in on the ongoing opportunities that we send out that are fluid, that are constant. Even 5 years after the pandemic, we are still doing some really amazing things. And so if you just text that word, you'll be a part of kind of an army of volunteers that are doing really cool things in Washington, D.C. area.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Corey, for being available to be here today to share your story.
Dr. Booth, thank you. It really is an honor.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Corey, for your vulnerability in sharing your story. Your life is a reminder that God uses our struggles and what we think are the broken pieces of our lives for his purpose. We see our flaws, but he sees our beauty. I am so glad that you found your calling and have allowed God to use your impediment to impact your community. You will continue to see a bountiful harvest as you plant more seeds of grace and love to those in need. Thank you for your heart of service and allowing God to use you to make a difference. You are a gift to many. I will leave you with 3 affirmations from my Love Talk card deck. The first is, I have a light that shines bright because I am created in God's image. The second is, I am uniquely and wonderfully created, and there is no one in the universe like me. And the third is, I am called to make an impact in the lives of other people. If you have enjoyed this episode, please remember to like, subscribe, and share it with your family and friends. You can also follow me on Instagram at Dr. Beverly Booth and Facebook at Dr. Booth. To purchase the Love Talk Affirmation Card Deck or listen to other podcast episodes, please visit yourlovetalk.com. Thank you for tuning into this episode today. This is Dr. Beverly from Your Love Talk. Blessings.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Your Love Talk. Remember, you're never alone in your struggles. Take the time to affirm yourself daily as an act of love to yourself. And know that this podcast is here to offer genuine support and guidance whenever you need it. For more insightful and transformative discussions, visit yourlovetalk.com to explore additional episodes. Take the next step forward with courage, knowing you can overcome any challenge. That's all for today. Until next time.